Good. We're in Luke chapter 7 today. And you can come on up, Carrie. If you want to turn to Luke chapter 7, we'll be in it for the day. Remember again, Luke, writing the key verse there, Jesus, the Son of Man, came to seek and save the lost. This morning we're talking about doubt and faith. The bold faith of a Roman soldier and the honest questions of John the Baptist. And wherever you find yourself this morning, between faith and doubt, you are welcome here. And this message is for you, wherever you find yourself, because it can feel sometimes like doubt is kind of a prison. And Jesus would say to you this morning, if the Son has set you free, you are free indeed. So let's listen to this story from Luke chapter 7. This would just be the first 10 verses.
When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people, he returned to Capernaum. At that time, the highly valued slave of a Roman officer was sick and near death. When the officer heard about Jesus, he sent some respected Jewish elders to ask him to come and heal his slave. So they earnestly begged Jesus to help the man. If anyone deserves your help, he does, they said. For he loves the Jewish people and even built a synagogue for us. So Jesus went with them, but just before they arrived at the house, the officer sent some friends to say, Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my home, for I am not worthy of such an honor. I am not even worthy to come and meet you. Just say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed. I know this because I am under the authority of my superior officers, and I have authority over my soldiers. I only need to say, go, and they go, or come, and they come. And if I say to my slaves, do this, they do it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Turning to the crowd that was following him, he said, I tell you, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. And when the officer's friends returned to the house, they found the slave completely healed.
This is the good news of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you so much, Carrie, for that this morning. So, we're in chapter 7, and just verse 1 starts out when Jesus had finished saying all this. What's all this? Well, if you can recall, last week we had the Sermon on the Plain, and that's what Luke is referring to. And he's saying after Jesus had finished that sermon, he came to Capernaum and probably was staying, people think perhaps that he was staying at Peter's house there in Capernaum. But certainly Capernaum was sort of his local headquarters when he was in Galilee. And so there he is. And Luke is careful to say, when Jesus had finished all this to the people who were listening. Last week in the sermon, Jesus said, now to those who are listening, I want to tell you some stuff. Love your enemies and so on. So that extra sort of, the ones that are listening, I want you guys. And so that's what he was talking to. And Jesus now, in this chapter and the chapters to come, is going to put his own sermon into practice. He's going to demonstrate what the kingdom is about, and he's going to show the kind of people that are going to be included in the kingdom. Who's going to receive it? And he said he's going to preach the gospel to the poor. Remember that from his sermon at Nazareth. He's going to preach to the poor, release the captives, give sight to the blind, set the oppressed free, proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. He's going to, in his words, do good to his enemy. Jesus is going to put into practice all the things that he preached in his sermon. And he's going to reach every kind of person, every opportunity. He's going to push boundaries at every turn. And he's even, in this chapter, though we won't spend much time on it, going to push the boundaries of death itself. So he's going to begin with a centurion's faith. And interestingly, in this first story that Carrie just read, we actually never really meet two of the main characters. We probably don't meet the centurion. We're not sure about that. We certainly don't meet the sick man. And here we are in this story. And so in verse 2 there he says, when the centurion's servant, whom the master valued highly, was sick About to die, the centurion had heard of Jesus, so he sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. Now, let that sink in. A centurion. What is that? That is a Roman soldier in charge of roughly 100 men. Century, 100 centurion. So, let that sink in. This guy is the enemy. He is the officer who would make sure you paid your taxes to Rome. He is the enemy occupying army. He's the enemy. He has come to ask a favor of Jesus. He's also wealthy. Let all that sink in. Does he qualify for Jesus' compassion? Now, Luke has prepared us for this story all the way through already in his book. He's put these hints that the kingdom, the gospel was going to go not just to Jews, but to all the world. All through, we've seen that already. He's preparing us for the Luke Acts when the gospel is going to go to the Gentiles. As a matter of fact, there's going to be a centurion in the book of Acts called Cornelius, and he's going to be one of the first Gentiles to actually come to Christ. So centurions, Gentiles, gospel, Luke is sewing all that together so that we're going to be prepared for this as we continue in his book. Luke speaks favorably of centurions throughout his book. At the cross, we're going to see one that's going to look and go, surely this man was the Son of God, and other comments. So here he is speaking favorably about Roman officials, Roman soldiers, even though they are the occupying army. Now, it would be hard for this centurion to be assigned to this district and not have heard of Jesus. That's not a surprise at all. He may well have been assigned to some of the rallies that Jesus was holding, some of the mass teaching times. Maybe there was news about this sermon going on the mount, on the plain, whatever. And this centurion would have been likely sent there just to be sure everything's okay. Is this guy a troublemaker? Is there a rabble-rouser? Is there possible revolt here? And he would have gone and, to his surprise, been greeted with something very different than he expected. And something about that caught his attention. Something about Jesus said that this is not your typical radical Jewish revolutionary. Something else is going on here. And so in this case, we find out that this centurion had a valued, honored servant. That's a surprise as well. This man is very sick. Luke uses a term meaning he is really sick. Matthew says he's paralyzed and in great pain and in torment. And the surprise is that centurion actually cares about this. Because a Roman and his servant, if he got sick or whatever, he was disposable. He could kill him. He could get rid of him. He didn't need to care anymore. But this man did. He cared for him. He calls him my boy. There's just a sense that he's very fond of this servant. He was a possession, not for this man, an unusual devotion. Just as an aside, it's true that people outside of Christ can have very commendable character. We shouldn't be surprised when we find someone outside of Christ who has a very commendable character. This man did. I guess another thing it reminds me of is, how do we treat those who serve us? How do we treat our employees? What about servers at a restaurant? The cashier, or this one, the phone support person when I've been on hold for an hour. How do I treat people like that? This centurion treated his slave with great kindness. He sends Jewish elders to Jesus. Now, if you read Matthew, and some have great difficulty with this, it seems like the centurion came directly. And Luke says, no, he sent a delegation. Now, I try to think of an example. We could say that John A. Macdonald, our first prime minister, built the CPR. He built a railway across the country. We can say that as an accurate historical fact. Now, do you picture John A. Macdonald out with the hammer, laying the track? Of course, he didn't physically do it, but we can say that. And in the same sense, Matthew can say he came to Jesus, and Luke can say he sent people to Jesus as his representative. That's what's going on here. But why did he send Jewish elders? Did he think he'd have a better chance of success because he's a Gentile? Or was this an act of respect? As the story unfolds, we realize this wasn't just an opportunist, well, I'll send the Jews because he won't talk to me. This was a act of humility because he felt, I'm not worthy to talk to this man. Now, this is remarkable. First of all, this centurion enjoyed this level of respect with the elders. Sometimes we might find ourselves in situations where people actually resent us because of what we might represent. Maybe as a Christian in your workplace, for whatever reason, the person may have a struggle with that, and they may assume things about you because you are a Christian. This man overcame all of that. Any assumptions they might have had about him as a Roman enemy, the Jewish elders somehow saw the quality of this man to the point that they were ready to come to Jesus. In verse 3 it says, therefore, when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly, this man deserves to have you do this, to heal his servant. Why? Because he loves our nation Israel. He built our synagogue. That's amazing. Maybe the very synagogue that Jesus taught in. There's apparently a ruin of a synagogue in Capernaum that they found. It may be this very place that he built. And so here this man had built the seminar. Again, don't picture him actually building the synagogue, right? It's like seminar, synagogue. Don't picture that. But he probably financed it and made it happen. Key word in there is deserves. They're making a case to Jesus. He loves the nation he built. The implication here is they assume Jesus would consider this Gentile occupier not worthy of help. They think, talk Jesus into this by making a case. Now we look at that and we go, can we be deserving of grace? Surely those things are actually different, aren't they? We don't deserve things from God. We may have expectations that we've lived a certain way and we've gained enough points that God owes us. That's never really true, is it? Because any action with God is grace, not earned, not deserved. And Jesus is not motivated by their argument that he deserves this. That's not what he ends up commending. He doesn't commend his character or his charity. He commends his faith. Unlike the Jewish elders, the Gentile centurion seemed to get this. They thought, we need to make a case for this man of how deserving he is. Not so the Gentile centurion. He understood that Jesus operated in grace, not merit. So he comes and he excels in courtesy. He says, literally, don't skin yourself. He says, don't trouble yourself by coming. He's concerned on Jesus' behalf. If you come to my house, I'm a Gentile, you're Jewish, that's going to create a problem for you. That's amazing to me. Because I'm sure your average Gentile would find it extremely offensive that they couldn't have a Jew in their house because the Jewish person would be unclean. That would be very offensive, potentially, to this centurion. He overcomes that. He's concerned not for himself, but concerned for Jesus. If you come, that may well create a problem for you. Jesus says, no, I'm going to come. Shall I come and heal him? Is reported in Matthew. So Jesus is now coming with the Jewish elders towards the Gentile centurion's house. A messenger presumably runs ahead. Now, Jesus didn't need to go. We know, if we've read the story, that he can heal at a distance, but they didn't necessarily know that. So he's not going because he has to physically be there. He's going because the person, the centurion, matters. And he's doing it for his sake, even though it would violate Jewish rabbinic law for him to go in the house. Not the actual Old Testament law, but Jewish rabbinic law. So hearing that Jesus is actually approaching, it seems like the centurion reconsidered and thought, I don't think that's actually going to work. So he sends a second delegation when Jesus isn't far from the house. He sends, this time not Jewish elders, but friends. They're probably Gentiles. Don't trouble yourself. Now he has a different reason. I don't deserve to have you come under my roof. That's why I didn't even consider myself worthy to come to you. He calls him Lord. I'm not worthy. He built the Jews a house of worship, but he didn't feel Jesus should come to his house. So not just this will create a problem for you, Jesus, but I'm not worthy. Now just a minute here, Mr. Centurion. You are a powerful Roman leader. You could order Jesus to pick up your gear and walk a mile with it. But you discern something that even though on a structural political level at the time, you could order Jesus around, you actually recognize, no, I'm not worthy to come into your house. The Jewish elders said, he is deserving, Jesus. The centurion says, I am not deserving. I'm unworthy even to be near you. This is strong faith linked with true humility. He enjoyed high regard of others, but he had a humble opinion of himself. So he says, just say the word, Jesus, and my servant will be heard. He's courteous, but he is confident, not in himself, in his own deserving, but in Jesus' ability and compassion. Like us, he would say, come boldly before the throne of grace, not because we deserve it, but because of Jesus' incredible mercy. Faith. Now, I don't know that anyone at this point had ever seen Jesus heal at a distance. It's possible that that happened before this, but the centurion almost certainly did not know that. And yet, he has a faith beyond the Jewish elders that thought Jesus needed to come to the house, probably beyond Jesus' disciples. He had a faith in Jesus' intrinsic authority, not a superstition in externals that you need to be there and say some magic words and touch the person, but he had an authority that even from a distance he could heal. And he gives this explanation to Jesus, which is remarkable. I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. In other words, I answer to superior officers, and then I have people who answer to me. I am in a chain of command. I tell this one, go, and he goes. This one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. The centurion orders people around all the time. And he recognizes that Jesus also is in a chain of command. Now, he doesn't fully understand the deity of Christ, but he understands that he is linked to a higher authority. And that Jesus could delegate that authority and heal from a distance. He says, even I, lower down in the pole, can issue commands and have them obeyed. How much more you? This unquestioning obedience, he understands that Jesus is acting in line with God. Now, it would seem that maybe this last conversation did happen in person, in front of the centurion's home. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Now, that's remarkable, that Jesus could be surprised. It says that he was amazed at him. He turns to the crowd. I haven't found such great faith even in Israel. He marveled, so shocked he stops in his tracks. Jesus discovered the faith of this man and then praises him in front of those who are listening. Now it's interesting what amazement Luke highlights. He doesn't highlight with amazement that a Gentile is going to be healed. He doesn't highlight amazement that Jesus heals from a distance. But rather, he's amazed by the faith of a foreign centurion. A couple of other times Jesus marveled. One is actually the unbelief of the people in Nazareth. And another time he was amazed at the faith of a Canaanite woman, another foreigner. Jesus is surprised. We're surprised too, but for a different reason. And then I guess I would ask us, who might surprise us with their faith? We need to have a certain idea of what someone with faith looks like. And then we meet someone, maybe from a different tradition, maybe a different life story, maybe a different lifestyle, but we talk to them and we find there's faith there. Jesus found faith in an unexpected place, even in his enemy, technically. Not even in Israel. Not that there wasn't faith there, but this exceeded anything he had seen in Israel. Matthew goes on to say in this context, I say to you that Jesus is saying, many will come from the east and the west and will take their place at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. Implication, lots of people are going to be there who are not Jewish. It will be from across the world. Matthew quotes Jesus here as saying, go, let it be done just as you believed it would, and his servant was healed at that moment. Luke says the man who'd returned to the house found the servant well, completely well in mind and body. So Jesus honors the centurion's concerns about the Gentile house and heals from a distance. And we'll look at it in any detail, but the next story is Jesus entering a village and there's a funeral procession happening. It's a tragic scene. The widow has lost her only son. Jesus is overwhelmed with compassion. He says, don't cry. He touches the plank that the dead man is on, which would have been ritual defilement. And he says, young man, get up. And he rises and gives the man back to his mother. In this case, Jesus taking 100% initiative. And, of course, in the centurion story, he is just responding. Everyone was filled with awe, praised God, and says, a mighty prophet has come among us. God has come to help his people. All through Luke. Luke is very careful to tell a story about a woman and then a story about a man. All the way through. Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary and Joseph, Anna and Simeon. Here we've had the centurion and his servant, and then we have the widow and her son. All that balancing all through. Now, in that story, I'll just point out that there is no faith mentioned. The woman, it's a funeral procession, the son has died. No one has any faith that Jesus could raise this man from the dead. No one's ever seen a resurrection like that from Jesus. First one recorded. No faith mentioned. Jesus just does it. Keep that in mind as we go on. Now we come to Jesus and John the Baptist. Luke has left John languishing in prison in chapter 3. And he places this story here to highlight Jesus' identity. The disciples of John the Baptist told John about everything Jesus was doing. So John sent two of them to the Lord to ask you, and here's the question, Are you the Messiah we've been expecting? Or should we keep looking for someone else? Now, John is in dungeon of Herod's fortress. He's there because he rebuked Herod's marriage. John has disciples, and they come to report these things that have happened. That would probably include the centurion's servant healing, maybe the resurrection of this widow's son. But John's in prison, and we don't know exactly how this was related by the disciples, but something about it just sent John into questioning and some doubt. So he sends two disciples to Jesus to essentially repeat verbatim, are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we be looking for someone else? Now, some are honestly so shocked by this question from John that they suggest really it was the disciples of John that were having trouble, and he just sent the disciples to sort of get things straightened out for their sake. That's not what's happening here. This question is from John, and it is real. John is asking, people think you're a prophet. Is that all you are? Something doesn't quite fit with my expectations. Are you Messiah? I have questions. Where's the judgment? Where's the fire that I spoke of about Messiah? I hear miracles, but something doesn't seem quite right. You're not acting like the Messiah I was expecting. Is there another one that will come that will better reflect what Messiah is supposed to be? And by the way, Jesus, don't forget, I'm still in prison. I've been faithful. You spoke of releasing prisoners. How about this one? And maybe John, confined, wonders at this point in his life if he mattered anymore to God. All that ministry that he'd had, was it effective? Is it all over now? And we know that the future for John is not bright. Matter of fact, if you read Mark's account, his head is severed from his body and presented at a dance. It's a horrible end for this servant of God. Here's this faith-filled proclaimer of Jesus. How can such a person experience doubt? He baptized Jesus, seeing the heavens opened, testified boldly about Jesus being Messiah. I'm not worthy to be baptized by you. It sounds like the centurion. Not worthy that you come to my house. Why this doubt? And I think the lesson for us, and this is so important, is that even the best can experience times of doubt. The context of where we are when we hear things taints them. For John, he is in a cold, damp prison. His ministry is over. Do I matter? Probably experiencing depression. His expectations of Jesus were not met. And we all have expectations. We may be conscious of them or not. We have expectations of other people. And if they don't fill them and fit them, sometimes we might become angry or bitter. Even those closest to us, we might have expectations about our spouse, that they should fulfill all our needs, and when they don't, we may have expectations of God. And when he doesn't quite operate the way we think he should, that can cause doubt and trouble for us. As you search for a new pastor, you may have expectations of what that new pastor will be like. Doubts, they're common to all of us, but they do not disqualify us. Jesus is not threatened by honest questions. Again, read the Psalms, full of questions. Jesus is not threatened by John's question. And John did the very correct thing when he was experiencing doubt. What did he do? He took his question to Jesus. He didn't hold it in and pretend. He didn't let it burn inside him. He didn't speak it just to his disciples and say, I'm not so sure anymore about this Jesus guy. He sent them to Jesus on his behalf. They arrive as the miracles are in progress. Many sick and afflicted and blind and demon-possessed are being healed at that very time. Luke is so careful to differentiate medical conditions from demon possession. Very different things for Luke. He tells John's disciples, go tell John what you've seen and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cured, deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. It's interesting, Jesus doesn't actually answer John's question directly. He wants John, and he wants us to consider carefully the claims of Christ and respond. He doesn't want us to just hear facts and go, okay, and move on. Okay, Jesus is what? Son of God? Okay, cool. No, he wants us to wrestle with who Jesus is, consider it carefully, and then follow him. So essentially what he does to John through his disciples is he recites back everything they've witnessed, the very hallmarks of Messiah. This is what Messiah does. This isn't really new information for John, but he phrases it in a way that will remind John of Isaiah's words. All these things were prophesied by Isaiah. This is what Messiah will be. And he phrases it so John goes, yeah, that's true, isn't it? That's true. Note the progression. Blind, lame, lepers, dead raised. Surely the dead raised is the climax, isn't it? No. The climax is the good news is preached to the poor. That's the climax. So he adds, blessed is anyone who does not stumble because of me. Blessed to those who are not offended by Jesus, even when he surprises us. The word stumble, it's actually scandalon, from which we get scandal. I know that many who grew up in church, typically millennials, but not just millennials, are going through something that they call deconstruction. Maybe aspects of faith as it was presented to them, the package of how it was presented, and there's certain fact pieces around that I can't really accept that. And then in the process of looking and what can I keep? What can I deconstruct? What can I keep? And to such people I would always say, I understand. And there will be things that have come with Jesus that don't belong there, that are not necessary to it, but the foundation as you're deconstructing, do not move from the foundation, which is Jesus Christ. And I would say that, yes, there have been areas that the church has not always been great. But it's not Jesus. Jesus is worth serving. He is trustworthy. If you need to deconstruct, do not lose the foundation, which is Jesus Christ. I think that's what Jesus is saying to John. John, you may have questions, and I welcome you bringing those questions to me, but do not stumble over me. Jesus is trustworthy. See how graciously Jesus deals with John's questions and doubts. It's more of an invitation than a rebuke. Elijah, Thomas, others experienced doubt. And do you notice that both the faith-filled centurion and the questioning John are commended by Jesus? That said, Jesus places himself as the dividing line. Our response to Jesus is critical. after John's disciples left, or Matthew says, as they were leaving, so perhaps they heard what followed, Jesus began talking about John to the crowds. So, what kind of man was it that you went out to the wilderness to see? Most of the people there would have gone out to see John in the wilderness. Some of them were baptized by him. He says, what kind of man did you go to see? Did you see a weak reed swaying with every breath of the wind? Was it like the grass of the field that just blows this way and that way? In other words, did you go to see some spineless, vacillating, fearful person? He said, no, you don't go to the wilderness to see that. Some fickle person blown by every breeze? No, despite his question that you all just heard, John was no wavering pushover, and you all know it. Remember, you traveled far to see him. You wouldn't do that for some lightweight. You went there because you were impressed with his strong character. He says, or when you went out to the wilderness to see John, did you expect to see some person dressed in expensive clothes? No. People with beautiful clothes and live in luxury are found in palaces. In other words, you didn't go out to see some spineless flatterer. You didn't come for the scenery or the luxury fashion. John was no sycophant, flattering for popularity or prestige. He was no kiss the ring type. He had courage. Matter of fact, that's why he's in prison, because he rebuked Herod at great cost. Those kind of people are found in palaces. Maybe Jesus here, a bit of a sideways glance at Herod. Or were you looking for a prophet? Yes. And more than a prophet, he says. John is the one of whom the scriptures say, look, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you to prepare the way for you. So Jesus is affirming John's calling here, maybe in the earshot of his followers. He's a prophet. But even more than that, he's the fulfillment of prophecy as well. And that is not diminished by his doubts that he just expressed. Matter of fact, he says he's the greatest in the Old Covenant. Jesus is going to set the record straight. He's honoring John, even though he just brought a doubtful question to him. I tell you, of all who have ever lived, none is greater than John. He inaugurated the new age. He is the ultimate Old Testament prophet. He called people to repentance. He pointed to me, and then he receded as he should. John, you did your job well. Remember when you said, Jesus must increase and I must decrease? I'm just the friend of the bridegroom. This greatness was linked to humility, just like the centurion. Your questions and your doubts, John, do not define you. I see you as the greatest of the Old Testament prophets. Still. Then he says, yet. Even the least person in the kingdom of God is greater than John. What's he saying? The blessings that we enjoy in the new covenant far exceed anything John could experience. The least in the kingdom, this side of resurrection, are privileged, even beyond Old Testament saints. Luke probably added these next verses for our benefit. All the people, even the tax collectors, when they heard Jesus' words, acknowledged that God's way was right because they'd been baptized by John. But the Pharisees rejected God's purposes for themselves because they hadn't been baptized by John. So Luke is saying, thanks to John, people responded to Jesus. You're no failure, John. You did your job. People were more open to hear Jesus because of you. And of course, the surprise is the group that should have been most receptive, the religious leaders, were not. John, you succeeded. So we don't condemn a person because they go into a season of doubt. There's no criticism for John's honest question. Just that reminder, don't fall over me. Trust me. Consider the whole life. Think of the impact that John had. I got to say, this is encouraging for me. There are times when I look back over ministry. Sometimes I'll contact a person, maybe they were part of a group and at the time, they were really strong in the Lord, and maybe at the moment they've actually fallen away. And I just look at all the things that I did, and I think, did I do any good? Did I succeed at all? Did anything really matter that I did? There seems to be people I look back and I wonder. I find encouragement from John and from Jesus here. Even in questions that I may have. Jesus went on to say, what can I compare this generation to? They're like children sitting in a marketplace, calling to one another. We played the pipe for you and you didn't dance. We sang a dirge and you didn't cry. This is a children's game. They're saying, let's play the wedding. Nah, we don't want to do that. All right, let's play funeral. Nah, let's not bother. He says, that's what you guys are like. John the Baptist came neither eating bread or drinking wine, so in other words, he was an ascetic. You say he's got a demon. Son of Man comes eating and drinking, celebratory. You say he's a glutton and a drunkard, friend of tax collectors and sinners. In other words, no matter what Jesus or John might do, it was never good enough for hardened, cynical people. Neither John's stern aesthetic or Jesus' kind, invitational graciousness was okay. John was too harsh and traditional, Jesus too silly. Now look, there's two very different expressions in John the Baptist and Jesus, and neither one of them was wrong. Many expressions. But he says, wisdom is proved right by her children. Here, wisdom portrayed as a woman with her children. In other words, Jesus' teachings stand up to study, and the children who follow them prove that Jesus' ways are right. When we act like the Father, we saw that last week, we commend the teachings of Jesus. We show that they are right. Well, what do we do with this? In this chapter, we've seen great faith, and we've seen shaky faith, and both people are commended. We even saw a story where there was no faith, and Jesus was just compassionate. We did see a marveling at the unbelief of the Nazarenes, but there it was a cynical, hardened rejection, not honest questions. And we found faith and doubt in unexpected places. And the fact is, faith and doubt may exist in you or me. God knows that. He has incredible compassion for us. Sometimes we would pray as one person did, Lord, increase our faith. And Jesus would say to us, if you have faith just like a mustard seed, the tiniest bit, if you put it into action, if you use it, we can say, oh Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. He took his doubts to Jesus. Our expectations maybe of a carefree life, there's no guarantees. Here's John, who's been faithful to God, and he's in prison. But Jesus understands. He's not threatened by our honest questions. He is the foundation. He is the author and completer of our faith. He holds us when we feel we can't hold on to him any longer. He holds us. He who began a good work in you will see it through to completion. And in our honesty, we come before God and we say, we believe, Lord, help our unbelief. If you find yourself in times of doubt, just be honest with God about it. He gets it. He sees the whole picture. He is the one who strengthens us and holds us in the palm of his hand.